Hello YouTube, this is the Compound Fracture YouTube channel, and we are continuing our playthrough of the game Suzerain. Yes, we are. So, we're trying to empower our people, we're trying to build socialism, we're trying to create a planned economy, and we're trying to do it all without losing our heads. Our head is a very valuable commodity in this here country. Without our head, the government would be run by somebody else who would do a far worse job. So we're finding ourselves trying to compromise with the reformists and liberals. Ooh. It's not the best position to be in, but it is the position we find ourselves in. So let's continue, shall we? This is part 5. Come on, loading screen. The trials of democracy. Yes, they are very trialing indeed. We have various clipboards around our empire here, so let's take a peek and see what we got. We'll start over here in Lauren. Industrial output, really? Oh no. The mayor of Morna has reported that their industrial output numbers are 12% lower. They want support to improve their industrial capacity. This seems like a very good priority for us. Although our budget is way down, our economy is also way down, so we will use what remains of our budget to try to improve our economy, if at all possible. Seems like the situation has leveled out a little bit. They're set to lose another 2%. But we can turn that around, surely. Prisoners are rioting, okay. Ward C of the Antel Rock Prison rioted. We do support the prisoners, and we hope to minimize the need for punitive justice in our country by providing the needs of the people. We should tackle crime at the root level. Let's see how that's going to go. What's happening in Narble? Oh, yes, this is where we visited, or we will visit. Oh, here we go. We have a visit happening. Okay. This is a rural development forum organized by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. Now, during our election campaign, we had promised to prioritize education, even though we would also love to be able to prioritize health. So let's see what we can do. The mountainous city of Narble had gritty tones to it. It was mostly regarded as one of the poorer cities in Swordland. Its people were hardy and wary. Even after the discovery of natural resources in the area, years of neglect by the central government were apparent on the buildings and the general infrastructure. Natural resources, namely gas and oil, were now under the control of Gasome. Oh dear, one of the largest corporations. We need nationalized oil fields, people. Let's see what we can do about that. My task in this forum was mainly symbolic, fake smiles and handshakes with oil barons, meeting with local politicians, but most importantly of all, to make sure that Narble does not feel like it was forgotten by the government. Feels are important, but efficacy is even more important, so let's see what we can do. The scenery so far, however, was a reflection of Narble's neglect. Main roads to the city were not maintained well. There were many bumps and empty discolored spots in the asphalt. Navigating and swerving to avoid the inconveniences, our motorcade finally started nearing the city. As if my discomfort from the bumpy ride was apparent to him, Serge rolled down the partition window. Oh, Serge, I do love you. We will be arriving at Hotel West in a few minutes, sir. Thank you for letting me know. Good job, Serge. You have a fine mustache and an even finer smile. So, we can ask him how his life is, or we can, question his smile. Let's ask him a question. Sir, I just want to say it has been great these last 2 months. Yes, it has been great. As you know, my wife Susan recently gave birth to our son, sir. And now my daughter just started at a very good high school. That's great news, Serge. I'm happy for you. I appreciate it, sir, truly. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to afford a good private school if she scored less in the entrance exams. Well, we need to improve public education, people. That should not be a choice you have to make, Serge. But I shouldn't have made my insecurity get to me. Erica outsmarts me all the time. I'm very proud to have a daughter like her. I also hope that Deanna will grow to be like her mother someday. Her mother is amazing. I'm sure she will, sir. After all, she is the daughter of a lion and a lioness. Well, that's very nice of you. My daughter looks up to the First Lady for inspiration, and it's not just limited to my daughter, sir. She is an inspiration for almost all the women in the country. But at the same time, it must be hard for the First Lady as well. I'm sure it is. All this attention, adjusting to this new high-profile life, and a husband that has great responsibility. You are right, it is hard for her. It must be, sir. We sometimes forget the important people in life between all the responsibility and rush. You know, those we care for. I agree. Serge continued after a moment of silence. Have I told you, sir, we named my son George? The doctor said he is very healthy, and thankfully so is my wife. Well, we do care very much about the hospital. That's good. I hope the hospital has good service. Normally, we would have been treated in one of the suburban hospitals, but thanks to the special coverage of the presidential staff, we were transferred to the Emerald State Hospital. We need to increase the quality of services for all, Serge. That sounds like a tough issue to solve, he says. Well, that is our second priority. Education is our first priority, but we hope to be able to solve both. I already started thinking about their university education, especially Erica. I want to send her to a good private school, but with the current state of the economy, it's going to be hard for us. Maybe we should give you a raise. Oh, our personal wealth is only 1. We'd have to go down to 0 if we help him. We don't want personal wealth, but I'm concerned that we may need personal wealth soon. Well, this is very difficult. I love Serge and I want to help him, but private school might not be the way to do that. All of these choices are terrible. We either lose what little wealth we have, and we do not expect to take any bribes or find any ways to improve our personal wealth. One way or another sounds an awful lot like privatization to me. It's hard for everyone sounds cold and uncaring. I think we'll have to be cold and uncaring here. We hate it, but what must be done must be done. If anyone can fix the economy, that's you, Mr. President. I think so, too. The car hit a major pothole and a bump which lifted us up in our seats for a second. This is unacceptable. We need to invest in infrastructure here. He agrees. We'll still need to drive back tomorrow unless you use one of these new helicopters. The motorcade approached the hotel. The Hotel West was supposedly the best hotel in Narble. The large 25-story main building was undoubtedly one of the taller and more expensive buildings in the city. It towered over nearby slums and has been a target for protests when it was first built. A crowd was gathered in front of the hotel with the welcoming committee at its center. As we approached the red-carpeted entrance, I could see the mayor of Narble and his top aides. I see we have a viewer. Welcome, welcome. Serge got out of the car and opened the door. He bowed his head respectfully and gestured towards the entrance. Thank you, Serge. Have a good day, he says. As soon as I left the vehicle, the fresh air of Narble filled my lungs. Almost immediately, everyone present in the crowd flocked over to me with an excessive display of courtesy, smiles, and handshakes, while I donned the mask of a politician. A mask that I was very used to. Oh dear. Well, we could continue with this meeting, or we could check out the remaining exclamation marks. There aren't really very many at the moment. There are these clipboard thingies. What are the clipboard thingies again? They're just reports. So let's read the reports before we continue. This is an H3 highway report. This is the highway we started constructing last, like 3 episodes ago, I think. The work's going very well. That's good. Project supervisors confirmed the report, saying that most of the preliminary work had been done. However, the government officials added that there were a couple of delays related to construction materials that were not included in the report. Well, I suppose our public works are not super efficient at the moment, but that is a lot better than privatization. Young Swords did another terror attack, those damn fascist youth. Oh, that's awful. Opened fire with an automatic rifle on protesting civilians. 17 people were killed, including the attacker who shot himself afterwards. The rifle was hidden behind a newsstand. The police have been notified of this method, and all newsstands will be targeted by the police. That is a little bit disappointing. Free newsstands are very important. They might use this as an excuse to clap down later. 2 reports in the Capitol. Here's the PFJP report on reforms. That is the Social Democratic Liberal Party. Recently outlawed their demands for the reform package. He declared without the implementation of term limits and limited decrees, it would be difficult for him and his party to stand behind the reform package. You know, I'm not a huge fan of term limits in general. I think the will of the people ought to be respected, even if they decide to re-elect the same president. We have seen in the real world that occasionally there is a revolutionary leader who is incredibly popular, but is forced out of government by something as arbitrary as a number of terms. That's not ideal. We do like limited decrees, though. We call for as much popularization of democracy as possible. If we can't win an election, after all, we don't deserve power. Many members of the USP, the United Swordland Party, led by Albin Calvin and the reformist wing of the party, and that is our party, by the way, clarified their demands from the government in the party Congress. For the upcoming constitutional reform, Albin Calvin stated that without minister reforms, they won't be able to stand behind the new reform package. I think we can do that. So let's continue on this meeting now. Briefing on the current welfare situation, here we come. I arrived at the meeting room for my talk with Ciara and Pascal. Before beginning, I took a moment to appreciate the view from the balcony. The mountains of Narble were completely covered with snow. While I was mesmerized by the scenery, Pascal Benewal walked up to me. So who is this man? He is an author and a government official who serves as the Minister of Health, Social Affairs, and Labor. We like him already. He is a party member of our party. Let's continue along here. He wrote 8 books, including a bestseller called The Unfortunate Man, where he tells the story of a family of poverty-stricken miners. We really like him. He became known as a writer who depicts the struggles of sordid life. Earned him praise from middle-class and civil rights groups. Interesting. So he was elected to the assembly and advocated for workplace safety regulations and a workers' compensation program. Very good things. He was an important force in the shaping of the nation's first social security policies. Initially a supporter of Alfonso's programs, that is, the privatizer, Pascal eventually turned against free market reforms. We love this man. He is our new favorite. Well, Serge is our favorite. Serge is going to keep being our favorite, but Pascal is a close second. My Minister of Health was unironically, he was ironically somewhat portly. I don't know how that's ironic at all, but, you know, okay. A few pounds of weight is not necessarily unhealthy, sir. Having gained a few pounds since his breakthrough as a best-selling writer, but his authority on social affairs could not be questioned. He likes the view. Ciara Walda, the Minister of Education. Let's read about her a little bit. Aggressively promoting educational reforms and socialist policies. We love her too. This is going to be a fine meeting. We like both of these people. She thinks the views are spectacular as well, but if you look in the opposite direction, you will see what Seoul's decades of neglect did to the city. She likes trousers over dresses. We support that as well. Most of the people living in Narble are workers, farmers, and their wives and children. They are breaking their backs for close to no pay, all thanks to greedy corporations. You know, I'm noticing here my webcam, and I'm sure this has been happening the entire series, is in the way of our codecs on the side here. Oh, game stream. We had the wrong... Oh no. Oh no, indeed. Huh. Seems that we have a little bit of an issue here. We'll go back to screen cap and we'll just have to deal with it. That's okay. You see here our setup for our segment that will end this stream. That's okay. Nothing's perfect on this here web stream. We are still new after all, but we're making progress. Yes, we are. Just like we are in the country of Swordland. Most of the people living in Narble are workers, farmers, and their wives and children. They're breaking their backs for close to no pay, all thanks to greedy corporations. My intention is to help the working class. Yes, it is. I'm glad we see eye to eye on this issue. We sure do. If you look past the view, you can see the real problems. Real problems like poverty. Pascal nodded gravely. This was a subject he knew quite a bit about himself. His best-known books were all about the plight of Swordland's less fortunate. You know what? I'm going to try very quickly to see what we can do. Oh yes, the game capture does indeed work. It's just that we were, unfortunately, alt-tabbed out. Haha, we are learning! Education is important, people. This was a subject he knew quite a bit about himself. His best-known books were about the plight of Swordland's less fortunate, drawing from his own past growing up in squalor. Well put, Miss Walda. I don't need to tell you about my own experiences with poverty, and you've been through similar hardships yourself, Mr. President. We sure have. Well, let's relate to her problems rather than making it about ourselves. It feels like the cards are stacked against you. Exactly. It feels as if there is no way out. Ciara Walda says you don't have to have been born poor to sympathize with the plight of the impoverished, much as you don't have to have been born a woman to recognize Swordland's need for parity among the sexes. Right you are. Her tone got serious. Isn't it time Halsword addressed these issues? Yes, it is. Rather than bowing to the wishes of the hawks and fearmongers in the establishment and diverting yet more resources to the military and law enforcement, well, Sierra, we have turned down every request by the military and law enforcement for more funding, even though we are worried about invasion. So I can say with confidence that we see eye to eye. Our welfare, healthcare, and education systems have been decaying since the recession. Swordland's poorer communities are losing hope. Hopelessness and a lack of opportunities can drive people to extreme situations. We're seeing increased crime, domestic violence, rising inequality between men and women. Oh dear. Let's see. Those issues must be tackled from different directions. We need to engage it holistically. That's kind of all right. What else is there? Jobs and growth seems good, though at the same time, again, I question where the game will take that. This seems like a non-answer. I think we'll talk about engaging it holistically. If we solve the problems of popular democracy, the people should be able to help all of these issues. Pascal's planning to help by using an increased budget to improve the quality of healthcare. Ciara thinks that could prove useful, but we need to be doing a lot more. Education has similar issues. I agree. There's another subject he wants to mention. He has been working on improving the rights of workers in our country and has proposed a draft bill that is currently being reviewed by our party. Well, you can count on our full support. Mr. Clavin has already backed me and given his support. Swordland has fallen behind most other countries on the subject, and it is my responsibility to ensure this is not the case. Well, I agree we need to improve the standards for our workers. We most certainly do. What else is there here? I'm going to say I agree. Swordland must provide for its own people and move forward. Our budget number, unfortunately, might not agree with our high-minded ideals here. We'll see how this works. It is also a matter of life and death. Every decade we hear of some horrific incident. Yes, we do. So, would you back the bill when it arrives on your desk? Absolutely we would. Okay. He's relieved. He smiles. It's getting a little cold out here. Let's head inside. I agree. The meeting room was already prepared for state business. Small gifts for each of us had been placed on the table by the municipality, and we took our seats. Well, I think we should start with education, because that is our #1 priority. Swordish education is free, but we have a very outdated system that I want to reform. The other important issue is lack of access to education in rural areas, especially for young girls. Your administration has the power to solve both problems. Yes, we do. My highest priority is to get enough funding to be able to build schools in rural areas while I cleanse our educational system of its nationalistic indoctrination and sexist teachings. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Let's talk about literacy first. 80%. That is not great. Far lower among girls, that is terrible. The most illiterate areas are Bergia and England. That's correct, although Lekoven skews the statistics for the Nargis region, which also has a vast number of illiterate citizens. This underlines my point. Okay. What's the difference between urban and rural education? Urban areas have 3 times the number of schools per 10,000 people compared to rural areas. Rural areas also suffer from a lack of teachers. You know, I think solving this education problem will go a long way towards battling against these young fascist gangs who are doing terror attacks. Education, after all, is one of the best ways to keep people away from fascism. That's not a very good ratio. Worse than expected, yes it is. This is one of the most important problems we face, if not the most important. A huge part of the population is forgotten. Well, how many teachers and students do we have in total? There are about 5 million students, 3 million in primary education, 1 in secondary, and 1 in tertiary. There are 155,000 teachers. So let's do some math here. I think that means about 20 students per teacher. Am I right in that? Yes, I am. 20 students per teacher. That's actually pretty damn good, if you ask me. Here in the imaginary land I live in, known as Canada, it seems to be more like 1 to 25, not 1 to 20. But we have had decades of education cuts to create that situation here. Swordland is full of young and bright minds. Okay. We should keep striving to make education available for all. Yes, we should. I think there needs to be a change in the way of thought. We should help children to question and educate themselves. Yes, we should. That's tremendous. Let's hear about healthcare. Swordland has a free healthcare system, except for a few private hospitals operating under it. Well, that is a 2-tiered system, and that is a bit of a problem. Yes, it is. We don't want the rich having much better healthcare than the rest of us. Most of the populace receives adequate treatment. Health issues primarily appear in rural areas due to lack of quality services. He's doing his best to ensure that citizens of all ages receive the best health care they can, and he personally wants to solve the high infant and maternal mortality problem. So how many beds are there? I wish I had a baseline understanding of what 10 beds per 10,000 citizens means. He says it's a very good number, so I'll have to take him at his word. We see a lower number in these rural counties again. Ciara says we Angola and Wayland as well are hardly countries to take as a standard, but it's good to know we aren't in a huge health crisis yet. Interesting. What about life expectancy and mortality rates? Our expectancy is 65 years, and if memory serves, I think most advanced countries were well into the 70s by the 1950s, I think. So that's a very low number indeed. Mortality, infant mortality is a worrying 85 per 1,000 births, while our maternal mortality is at 90 per 1,000. That's not great. Be assured that we are doing everything we can to save mothers and their newborn. Those numbers are saddening indeed, I agree. We are working very hard on improving the quality of services. So how many doctors and nurses are employed? We have 31,000 doctors and 73,000 nurses. Okay, high number, sure. Ciara doesn't want to be rude, but out of those numbers, how many are in urban and rural areas? That's a good point. Very good point. The data shows that per 10,000 people in urban areas, there are about 11 doctors, while in rural areas, there are only 3. I'm starting to see why we might have high infant mortality rates. Treatment time is still too high due to the low number of doctors in rural areas. Thank you, Pascal. I guess that's everything. Ciara wants to say something else, it seems. What is it? Look at this impoverished city. The streets are full of potholes, the hospital's barely functioning, the school half open. This is not about Seoul or even Alfonso failing. This decay in Swordland's forgotten regions has been going on for many decades due to the structural corruption which is fueled by capitalism. Well, you are very correct. We're here to change that trend. That remains to be seen. She's working on the new education system, and my support would be welcome. One way or another, we need to transform. Greed and unchecked capitalism will not magically provide for the people. Tell me more, please. Her plans require an increase in the government budget. She aims to solve the problems we highlighted with the allocated money. By building schools in these less fortunate rural areas and through fundamental changes to the education system, she will unlock the potential of all children, girls and boys alike. Okay, well, our education mandate is important. That is what we were elected on, so we absolutely must prioritize it. We're bringing hope to the table, which needs to be followed by action. I agree. There is much to be done, and if we are given the budget, there will be opportunities to implement policies. Wouldn't the promotion of private education help create additional funds, says Pascal? No, Pascal, you're wrong. Yes, but at what cost? You know, here in my home province of British Columbia, the right-wing government that happened about 15 years ago or so decided to direct a whole lot of government money towards private education. This is a problem. It did not save money to promote private schooling. Yes, but at what cost, she says. She's a supporter of the private sector in education because at the end of the day, they are focused on profit first. What are you working towards, Pascal? He wants to improve the low quality of healthcare in the rural areas. So he created draft plans to increase the salary of doctors and upgrade the equipment of the hospitals. Seems to me that doctors are probably pretty well paid already. Maybe more nurses, maybe more facilities might be better. He can do more with an increased budget and additionally a privatization plan to promote private investments. Oh, Pascal, I liked you, but you keep talking about privatization as if it's the road forward. Oh, dear. Quality of healthcare in less fortunate areas matters more. Exactly, he says, it would directly diminish the depressingly high infant and maternal mortality situation. Besides, it would have economic benefits. Yes, it would. He hopes to create competition and increase the quality of healthcare with the privatization effort. Oof. A private healthcare system would increase the price of treatment and make access worse for the average citizen. That's correct. I have picked a side in this debate. Besides, she believes that we have decided to promote a more planned economy. Yes, we have. Her expectations from the government is that we understand and focus on the needs of the people. Okay, what are our choices here? We are elected representatives of our people and we will prioritize their needs. Yes, we must show through our actions, I agree. So we've covered all the necessary subjects. I guess this is the end of the meeting. The ministers left and I tended other official business in the city. The weather was relatively cold, but it didn't keep a group of USP supporters to come out and cheer for us on the streets. Just by looking at the citizens' attire, it was easy to understand that the current state of Narble, some people were wearing clothes a few sizes too large, some kids did not even have shoes, yet there was hope in their eyes. They were excited to see their president in their city. Okay, I think that was a successful meeting. I think our budget cries at the investments we must make, but that's okay. Budgets do not shed true tears. Only fake tears. And we don't care about fake tears. Disaster in a mine? Oh no. We definitely need to increase workplace safety regulations. Neglect in working situations by the Needham Mining Group. Perhaps we can disempower the Needham Mining Group in order to prevent future deaths. Meanwhile, the highway appears to be about halfway done. Oh, and there's another update from Estord. Young Swords member found decapitated. Critical support, people. Don't know about the tactics, but at least they targeted a fascist, am I right? The Red Youth are responsible for the incident. Unfortunately, like all acts of individual terrorism, this will have more of a blowback on the Red Youth than anything else. The Red Youth will expect to be targeted for reprisal, and it is not worth it to take one fascist out. After all, there are many. Okay, let's continue. We'll take a look at the reports before we look at the question mark. NFP on reforms. The leader of the NFP, the National Front Party, which is the fascist party in Parliament, has announced today that they are completely against any threshold reform. He emphasized that this would lead to unwanted elements entering the assembly. I think he means us. I think we are unwanted. Okay, well, we disagree, fascists. We do disagree. Workers' rights bill nears completion. Oh, that's excellent. Okay. Now, what's the exclamation mark? An investigation on the influence of the Young Swords and the Red Youth organizations on the post-assassination unrest has concluded. Both organizations haven't officially organized or called for illegal actions, but several low to mid-level leaders from both have links to insightful actions that led to deaths, injuries, and instability. This allows us to ban the organizations. We are absolutely going to ban the Young Swords. In general, I am all for freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. I think these are very important things, but those freedoms end once you start creating gangs with the intention of beating the crap out of activists and minorities, as we're seeing right now in the Proud Boys. So the Young Swords should be banned. The Red Youth, on the other hand, although they are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, having ties to the Eastern Bloc and some anti-democratic ideas, they are fighting for the average citizen in the end. And they were certainly not in any way associated with the assassination. So we are going to ban the Young Swords. There will be blowback, but we can handle it. We'll read the report. Upon receiving the order, thousands of police officers conducted cease and desist operations against the Young Swords. Our forces closed hundreds of organizational offices and affiliated businesses all around the country. Additionally, judges have been given orders to block all bank accounts and to freeze all assets. Well, that's what happens. Dozens of peaceful protests from the members of the organization were forcefully dispersed. Oh, I think it's better to probably just let those protests peter out rather than force dispersing them, but we were not given the option. That's unfortunate. One shootout in Jen has lightly wounded 3 officers. Most of the organizational capacity of the entity has ceased, but cleanup operations continue. All remaining elements from the Young Swords resisting the order are now being considered as violating the law and are being arrested. Okay. Here's the finalized drafted constitution. Okay. Finally, our campaign promise can be enacted. The Reform Committee have finally borne tangible results in the draft of the changes we're about to be presented. I walked the marble corridors of the palace, thinking about the huge decisions. As I entered my office, my secretary, Livia, greeted me. "Good morning," she says. I'm going to ask about her day. I want to be nice to our secretary. She's fine. More importantly, however, that is not more important. It is equally important, Livia. Are we stressed or are we perfectly fine? I guess that depends on whether or not we want to be honest. I think we might want to give a non-answer to her on this one and say we're perfectly fine. She likes it. She believed us for some reason. She has something on her mind. "Mr. Rain," she says, "can you give me a hint about your reform plans? If you ask me, taking away the judge's immunity is long overdue, but it might anger a lot of people." Well, we expect anger. I will take it into consideration. I do appreciate you giving your input. It might be helpful in the future. So we won't shut you up. And here are Peter, Dinosaur, and Naya. Okay. Good morning, everybody. "Good morning, Mr. President." It's very scholastic. "Good morning," says Peter. "Time to finally get this proposal going." And Dinosaur says, "After your modifications, we will be starting the process." Well, we can go over each point and get some more input from our advisors, or we can just start. Input is always welcome. Let's talk. Dinosaur says, apart from the first two sections of decreasing the Supreme Court's authority and limiting presidential vetoes, nothing else has been agreed on. We should start talking about Section 3. This is about the impeachment process of the president. Currently, in cases of high treason and breaking the Constitution, the Supreme Court may impeach and try the president. We need to be worried about that. We're trying to disempower the Supreme Court. They could disempower us first. Most reformists want the impeachment to be initiated by the Assembly. I agree. They think they do not have any power over potential rogue presidents. Okay. Yes, I do agree with that. This law is particularly dangerous for me. I'll be going against the old guard, and if we prove to be successful in the Assembly, they will be looking for anything to declare that they can declare unconstitutional to tackle you. All they need is the Supreme Court to impeach you. Yes, that is the concern that I share with you, Peter. Let's define a better impeachment process. Naya says yes, we'll be collaboratively working, okay. Section 4, okay. This is regarding the appointment of ministers. This was the question that our own party wanted solved. The reform part of our own party, that is. Currently, the president is free to appoint anyone from members of the Assembly, and nobody else is involved in the process. There is definitely demand to involve the Assembly. I agree. Democratization is a good thing, even if it comes at our own expense. Some reformists suggested the Assembly should nominate the ministers. Of course, according to the ratio of the parties in government, in our case, it's only us. The fifth section is about our infamous electoral threshold. Most reformists want to lower the threshold as much as possible. I agree with that for sure. Mr. Richter and the PFJP definitely wants to change on this topic. They find our threshold to be anti-democratic, which is something I also agree with. Yes, I also agree. This was our big mistake from episode 1. We failed to veto the law that would defund smaller parties. We like smaller parties, but we chose not to exercise a veto because we felt it would be taken as undemocratic. This was clearly a mistake in hindsight. Looks like we can fix that mistake now. Okay, so they think that this would destroy our party in the long term. Dinosaur says they're not wrong. The 10% threshold is what allowed us to control half the assembly with only a 30% minority, or majority. We have to win an election, not rig an election, in my mind. And we can with policies that benefit the people. Okay. We should definitely work to decrease the threshold for better representation. Naya agrees. Even after Seoul's resignation, we still have 3 parties in the assembly. Even the NFP, the fascists, are barely elected. Don't forget about the Communist Party and the Workers' Party of Bludia, both at close to 10%. Yes, 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 we want to help them. They are our allies to be. You would be opening their way into the parliament in the future. It's important we realize this. Of course we realize this. That's our entire goal. Of course, it might mean that we lose our majority, but that's okay. We're okay with that. I think we'll keep our majority if our policies are good. If our democracy is the reason for our downfall, we will have to accept it. Naya agrees. Dinosaur continues. He doesn't seem to have much to say about that. Section 6, this is about the presidential decrees. Reformists demand more limitations to the president's executive powers. Mr. Richter has demanded them to be removed entirely. I don't know. I do like the ability to bring in policy from the chair of the president. I think we can use that power to the good of our people and be held accountable during an election. That may seem undemocratic, but I'm not so sure. Naya suggested to bring in some limitations. While we keep them, we should try to make sure that they will only be used in emergencies. The trouble with policies that can only be used in emergencies is it is up to the government to decide what is and is not an emergency. With the instability in our country, I expect there to be the potential to declare emergencies pretty well at any given time. So that doesn't change too much. We could also make it dependent on an enabling act from the Assembly. Sure, it would make the whole process longer, but as long as we have a majority, nothing really changes. I'm tempted to think a bit longer about this. I do like presidential decrees in a generalized sense, even though that is against my typical wanting to spread out of power. Perhaps I should continue to court the support of the Liberal SocDem Party as a means to an end to disempower them in the future. But perhaps I should also think a bit longer and abstain from making an immediate decision. Let's limit the use. Tough choice, but I think that's okay. Friends will probably demand that we remove them completely, but he forgets Swordland is a presidential republic. Yes, we will resist that demand. Next one is Section 7, term limits. I don't love any of these. It feels like the game intends to present term limits as a democratic function to allow for greater, or to allow for greater choice in a sense. I'm not sure that that's true. If we are the best person for the job and the people believe it and the people re-elect us with an overwhelming majority, surely that is the will of the people. Term limits seem to impose an artificial limit on popular democracy. Let's just ask about them. They want us to include previously non-existing term limits. We can't allow somebody like Seoul holding on to his seat for 2 decades. I think if we limit the powers of the presidency, that should be less of a concern. Hey, if people keep electing one person, that means they really are content. Interesting. I don't know about scared for change. Sometimes the same person can continue a process of change. Even Sol knew he needed to leave, but we will leave it to the president to decide. I agree people should be able to elect the same person. Yes, that is how I feel about that. So let's move on. It's the question about the immunity of the judges. While the anti-Old Guard sentiment is increasing, there are talks that taking away their immunity would give us authority over judiciary. Naya does not support taking away their power for myself. The judiciary must be independent and long-lasting. While she agrees that the current court members are problematic, there is no way to resolve it. The law is supposed to ensure judiciary's independence by giving legal protection. We should be electing judges, I think, although that has not worked too well in America. Well, they need absolute immunity in theory, but look at what reality has got us. We've got to deal with the most corrupt Chief Justice in the world with no chance to deal with him. Interesting. I think we have to crush the Old Guard judges. I don't think we have a choice here. They have power over me, and I must take them on head on. I must fight back against their threats that they made last episode. I don't think we have a choice here. I think we have to rely on popular support to take on the Old Guard. We will crush them. Oh, Pieter. You always have a way with words, I suppose. It would be tougher to persuade the judges of this. Miss Edmonds may not want to cooperate. That is, who's Miss Edmonds again? Mrs. Edmonds. Oh, right. She is the justice who told us that we could count on her support. Interesting. The last one is the question about Sol's legacy, and basically his Member of Honor law, and gave him absolute immunity even when he's retired. He is a permanent member of the Assembly, but luckily he doesn't really attend. Maybe letting sleeping dogs lay would be a good idea here. According to the Constitution, the Member of Honor not only has legal immunity, but the state also covers most of their expenses as well as providing security, so he remains a figurehead. He can only be given to someone with it can only be given to someone by an absolute majority vote in the Assembly. Okay. That's why only Tarquin Sol has the title. He gave it to himself, and right after his military coup. The law is basically made to save the colonel, and it has a symbolic importance for Swordland because of it. We must get rid of this senseless law, Naya says. He should be able to face justice for the atrocities. That's true. Very true. We could keep the title but take away the immunity clause. That's an interesting option because there is a big part of our party that is still loyal to Tarquin Sol. We don't want a section of our own party turning against us at the same time we have made so many other enemies, from the fascists to the judges. I do think we need to open up the door to try this war criminal for his crimes. So let's do the in-between. It would be enough to hold him accountable, but why would you want to keep the title, Naya says? I think it's just a title. Well, regardless of what I decide, we'll need to work together. Okay. That may have been a mistake. Maybe we should have abolished it entirely and paved the way for the future. Let's start working on the draft, or thank you all for your input. I'm going to thank them. Okay, now we have the real decisions. This is the part we will not be able to take back. So according to Article 77 and 82, the President may veto a bill by returning it to the Assembly with a written statement. These articles do not contain any information on how to override a veto. As a consequence, the President has an absolute veto power that cannot be overridden. Let's limit vetoes. I like that. I think. I am concerned that if we remove vetoes entirely, the Reform Lib Dem Party might bring on the support of the fascists and parts of our own party, and might decide to force through privatizations against our will. If we have limited vetoes, we could veto such bills and have a much easier time garnering the 40% support we would need to uphold our veto. So let's do that. Section 2, the constitutional amendment process. According to Article 5 of the Constitution, an amendment may be proposed by members of the Assembly with at least 150 signatures. A 2/3 majority vote in the Grand National Assembly and a simple majority vote in the Supreme Court is required for the amendment. As a consequence, the Supreme Court, which is not part of the elected legislative branch, has enormous power in the amendment process. Interesting. Okay, so we've only been given this one option. I see that our dialogue options from earlier on are limiting our decision-making here, which makes sense. According to Article 17, the President of Swordland is not responsible for the actions performed in the exercise of presidential duties, except in the case of high treason or violation of the Constitution. In such cases, the President may be impeached by the Supreme Court in joint session, which has an absolute majority over its members. Therefore, the impeachment process only includes the Supreme Court and gives them great power over the executive. The Assembly may impeach, a 2/3 majority vote. That's the way. That's the way forward. We will make enemies of the court, but that's okay. We decided to do that. According to the Constitution, the President appoints the members to the Council of Ministers from elected members of the Assembly. This requires no confidence vote. Okay, so both of these two options are okay. I feel like, I wish we could refer back to what Franz Richter wanted, for instance. I'm not sure if it says here. I think what he wanted was the Assembly nominating the ministers, I think. Is it in the journal? So these are, that's interesting. I think these are the decisions that will dictate the game. Okay, cool. This is interesting. In a sense, the second option gives us a bit more power because we get the ultimate choice of who to appoint. But in this one, we'll be able to pick out of, we'll be able to choose anyone we want. We can choose the most radical people. Huh. I like option 2. Electoral Threshold. According to Article 50, a party needs a minimum of 10%. The votes of parties who pass the threshold are redistributed proportionally. Okay. Well, I think we should just try to decrease it as much as possible. We like the idea of small minority parties participating. So let's just do that. Let's be super democratic. I like that a lot. According to Articles 18 and 51, the President is able to issue decrees on political, social, and economic issues. They could not contradict the Constitution and are subject to judicial review. Therefore, I may issue decrees in many subjects without going through the Assembly. However, the Assembly may pass legislation on the same subjects to override decrees. Okay. Interesting. So this would require the Assembly declare a Declaration and Enabling Act, which would be a declaration of an emergency situation before we can bring in any decrees. Or we could remove decrees entirely. which would dramatically limit our power. I think we want the Enabling Act. I think we want to have some ability to issue decrees. According to this Constitution, the president shall be elected for 4 years. However, there is no mention of a term limit. Do not change. We don't want term limits. The Constitution gives the justices total immunity and describes no procedure of impeachment, making them untouchable by other branches of government. We definitely want to take them on. Okay. The Constitution defines member of honor title. Well, this is Soul's title. Let's see. Our two choices here are either to abolish the honorary membership or abolish the immunity. I think I'm going to go for the immunity because maybe that way we can use it as a justification to continue the support of the soul elements of our party. We don't want too many enemies where it's not necessary, and I'm not particularly opposed to honorary titles as long as they are not useful in practice. Here's the big decision. Do we go ahead? Yes. All right, Dinosaur. He thinks the amendments are ready to be proposed. Pieter has to say this too. The new threshold will be really difficult for the party to accept. Our guys are not fond of that idea. Dinosaur agrees. Interesting. This a little bit makes me regret not having made it 8%. We certainly didn't want to keep it at 10%, but 3 might be excessive. However, I think that really does fit our mandate of wanting to increase the power of the people at all costs. So, we'll either figure it out or we'll be prepared to reconsider. I think we'll figure it out. Do our best to make it work. What else? Naya does not agree with the new law that gives the Assembly power to impeach judges. She is also against the Chief Justice, and Naya is, like, really allied with the judges here. She's against the Chief Justice and his obstructionist behavior, but even if we get rid of all of them, the new judges will be less independent with this law. They will be scared to go against the administration. They need their protection to do their job. Interesting. Pieter thinks it's more important to get rid of the old guards. Okay. He asks that we be careful. I agree with that, certainly. I appreciate the feedback. Okay, we must introduce the proposal to our party. We'll need a strong speech. But first, we should talk to the leaders of both conservative and reformist wings. Mr. Clavin, who is the reform leader, I think. Is he? The free market. Yeah. He supports the reforms already. Miss Tory, who's the conservative, I guess. Maybe. Oh. Ooh, a lobbying firm. Interesting. Okay. Any advice in dealing with them? Mr. Clavin will be easier to persuade. Okay. Mrs. Gloria will be tougher to break. She's capable of turning the moderates and the conservatives against us. As much as I don't want to say this, if she makes demands to change the proposal, you may need to give in. We might give in when it comes to the percentage, like 8. If they suggest 8%, we might accept that. We will not, under any circumstances, accept it remaining at 10% because we want a presence from the far left within the Assembly. It's very important. Thank you for the advice. And we can end the meeting here. But that's not the only thing we can end here. We're closing in on the 1 hour mark in this here YouTube recording. So I think we're at the end of this episode. This has been episode 5 of Compound Fracture Plays Suzerain. Thank you for joining us as we continue the mission of improving conditions for our workers. So until next episode, I'll see you soon.